Hey everybody, the Long Shot Signatures here. The NFL draft is coming up soon. It is later this week, and figured I'd do a video talking about a lot of the prospects I've been able to get over the past couple of years, and share where they might end up going into the NFL, or at least what round they're projected, and then my thoughts on them. I am by no means a draft expert or prospect expert by any means. I don't watch tape, anything like that. But I looked up, did some research on these guys, kind of saw, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, added, my own 2 cents to the idea. And I used Walter Football for the mock draft, which is where all of these picks are coming from. I agree with some of them. Other ones I'm going to debate. And there is one player that they have going undrafted that I wholeheartedly disagree with. But I'll talk about that towards the end. But right now, as it looks, I could potentially have 4 guys end up in the first round. First guy we're going to talk about is Malik Willis, who is projected, according to Walter Football, to go to the Carolina Panthers at number 6. The Panthers are definitely in need of a quarterback, and I think it would be exciting to get someone who's almost like the next Cam Newton, a very physical, very gifted, athletic quarterback who can make, really big throws and can also use his legs to get out of trouble, get down the field. He's got excellent size and everything like that. But from everything that I saw, and one point that I'll make here in a moment that was really concerning to me, is that he's going to need to develop his fundamentals. Sometimes he's off with his throws, his feet aren't lined up, and he can really struggle when scrambling to make the right play or the right throw in that situation. Another thing that I noticed throughout the season was he had a really strong start at Liberty, who did not have a very difficult schedule from the looks of it. Ole Miss is probably the toughest game that they had, if based on my opinion. But the first 5 games, he was excellent. 71% completion percentage, had 11 touchdowns and no interceptions, and he was averaging 6.3 rushing yards per attempt. And stats aren't everything, and you're going to have, some games that are statistically bad, but it's a good performance. But after this, from week 6 on through the rest of the year, he had a 56.5 completion percentage, dropping way below an NFL starting average. 16 to 12 touchdown to interception ratio. His turnovers were becoming really bad, some pretty poor decisions. Some of it was due to not having a great cast of teammates around him, but a lot of them were due to decision making or off balance throws and stuff like that. And his rushing average dropped down to 3.5 rushing yards per attempt. He was still good scoring on the ground, but Liberty did not have a fantastic season by any stretch of the imagination. Do believe they won their bowl game, and this guy has a ton of potential. He's got the physical tools to do it. He's going to have to develop reading the defenses, getting his fundamentals set, and he's going to need some time to develop before he's thrown into a starting role. I don't really agree with the Panthers selecting him so early, just because it's such a boom-bust type of pick, especially in their system right now. Matt Rule's on the hot seat. I don't trust Ben McAdoo as a offensive coordinator. He did not do well in his past few stops as a coach, although those were also some pretty bad situations. So it's very up in the air on what the Panthers are going to do this year. And putting a guy that needs development, needs time to really learn behind someone into a situation that could be 100% different. There could be an entirely new staff next year. I don't know how that's going to bode well for a guy like that. Granted, he would have a pretty decent receiving core. I love DJ Moore as a wide receiver, so that would be a great fit for them. But, the health of Christian McCaffrey is a big deal. Their tight end group could do better, and their offensive line is just putrid. If they were to trade down to select him, maybe later, towards, the teens and everything like that, I would feel a little bit better about it and acquire some more picks to build around him. But at number 6, I just feel like that's way too risky and way too much to pay for a guy that you're not 100% sure about. This next guy kind of has a similar story. He's a different type of quarterback, but he also poses just as much of a risk in selecting him earlier to mid first round. But Walter Football has New Orleans selecting quarterback Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh at the number 16 pick. They do have 2 first-round picks, so I mean you could take him at either one. That's another team where I feel like maybe you could draft him a little bit later if he's still available, but at that point, the Steelers are going to have a chance to get him. They could trade up to select him and keep him within Pittsburgh. I think that would be a really good fit for him. But New Orleans is a team that I feel a little bit better about. Of course, losing Sean Payton, who is stepping away from coaching for at least this year, would definitely hurt his chances to be as successful. He'd be going in with Dennis Allen, who's a more defensive-minded coach, and a team that is kind of all over the place. We don't know how they're going to look at wide receiver, whether Michael Thomas is going to be the same anymore. Alvin Kamara is a great weapon. He's going to be behind a better offensive line, and he doesn't have to start right away either. Jameis Winston is already there as a quarterback, so I'm not too worried about him being forced too early into a starting role, so he would have some time to develop. But with a newer head coach, one that doesn't have as much experience, especially on the offensive side, as a Sean Payton, I'm not 100% sure. But some of the things that I looked up for Kenny Pickett, he had a big final season after a very average career at Pittsburgh. His first 4 years were not stellar by any means. Showed some potential, and it showed that he did have some upside, and he lived up to that this past season. But now you're kind of getting into the whole, is that a flash in the pan, or did this guy actually reach his potential and is showing what he could be at the next level? He is pretty sneaky athletically. He's not a super fast guy. He's not going to be running on the ground all the time, but he can get out of the pocket. He can extend plays, and when he's ahead of the defense and what they're doing, he's able to read that pretty well and get down the field using his legs pretty decently. One thing that a lot of people know him for is the fake slide, which was banned almost immediately after that game in college football. I'm sure that's been talked about in the NFL. I don't know if they ever did do a rule change with that, but he's not going to be able to outrun most defensive players in the NFL. But when when you have anticipation on what they're doing and what they're looking for, the ability to be sneaky athletic and kind of get to that first down marker is going to be big. So I think if he learns how to use that, that's going to help him out. Hopefully he doesn't. I don't think he's a run first QB though, from everything that I saw. Deep throws can be a bit of an issue. He wasn't always super accurate, down the field. He could overthrow, he could underthrow. Sometimes his fundamentals weren't as great, and so he didn't have the velocity that was needed. And he really heavily relied on Jordan Addison that final year. Addison is a fantastic receiver. He won the Biletnikoff Award, 17 touchdowns. He almost had triple the production of the next guy. So having chemistry with another receiver is fantastic, and that's great. And he did get the ball spread around pretty well at Pitt that final season. But how much of it was Kenny Pickett developing, and how much of it was Jordan Addison being a top-tier receiver, at least at the collegiate level? We'll see how he does next year. So there's a lot of question marks with him. I do agree that he could become a good quarterback, but I think just like Malik Willis, he is going to need to sit. He's going to need to go to a situation that works, where they want him and where they're going to build around him. So we'll see how that goes. The next pick that they have, that I have an autograph of, is safety Kyle Hamilton to the Steelers. This is, of course, assuming that Kenny Pickett has already been selected and they don't draft up or they don't trade up or anything like that. And Hamilton is a very strange prospect in that for most of the year he was projected as a top 5, top 10 kind of guy. Then the combine comes around and he is now dropping to late in the first round. I feel like this guy could be a real steal in this draft. One of the big things, of course, that caused the drop is that he's not a very fast safety. He doesn't have the blazing speed, but he's not slow either. He's going to get beat down deep by a lot of like quick receivers, thinking like Tyreek Hill. I don't think he would be able to cover him, but that's not 100% his job. But his instincts are amazing. I have to give a lot of credit to fellow YouTuber Bengal for doing a video about Kyle Hamilton and what he saw on tape. Kyle Hamilton is very good at reading what the offense is doing and is able to get that first step a lot quicker than most safeties at the position. So he doesn't have to be super fast to get to where he needs to go and cover a lot of ground on the field. It's just that if he's late on it, he's not going to be able to catch up in time. One of the things, and again, like I said, is he's not going to be a deep threat cover. He's going to be more of a guy to kind of cover the middle field and really read everything that's going on and then getting into the right spot, because that's what he's good at. So I feel like the Steelers would be a good fit for him, just because that's kind of what they do with their safeties anyway. But I'm not really sure. I don't feel like he's going to fall that far. I feel like that's a best case scenario for a team like the Steelers, but I feel like he's more of maybe an upper teens kind of guy, maybe even a top 10 still, for one of those New York teams that could really use help in the secondary. The last projected first rounder that I have that signed for me is projected to go to the Arizona Cardinals, and that is defensive end George Karloftis out of Purdue. This is a guy who, from the very beginning of the year, a lot of people were projecting to go in the first round, and he has stayed about at that pedigree. He is kind of a late first round projection. He's a very high motor and physical defender. He's able to get to the quarterback. He's able to tackle people behind the line. And he's fairly natural at it too. I mean, he's got the size and everything, but he didn't begin playing football until 8th grade, and he's still showing just how good he is. But the main criticism about him is that being that physical and bull rush kind of guy is really all he has to his repertoire. He's not a finesse kind of guy. He can be a little slow when trying to make those movements, not the fastest guy on the field, or as much agility as you would hope from a top guy, but that he's got a lot of foundational skill sets that are really good, that project really well at the NFL level. So don't expect a big year from him his first year. He's going to be more of a 1 to 2 years down the road. It could be a really good prospect. It is a little bit surprising to see the Cardinals being projected to take him, but losing Chandler Jones, it does kind of make sense to get that young pass rusher, and they do need to improve a little bit on defense there. The only second round pick that I have projected, and this guy has also been projected in some other drafts to be a late first round pick, is running back Breese Hall out of Iowa State, going to the Texans. Breese Hall, I love this guy. I'm obviously going to be very biased with these players because, they were cool enough to sign some autographs for me throughout the year, or the past couple years. But this guy is a fantastic runner. Had over 20 touchdowns the past 2 years. He's elusive, he's quick, he's a bruising running back, and the Iowa State offense, especially this year, really ran through him. Had they not had him, had he been injured for any stretch of time, their season would have been a lot worse than it was. A lot of comparisons had NFL comparisons for him came to Matt Forte, which I do agree with. I don't think he has the same receiving upside as Matt Forte did, but he does have some. So for the Texans, I think it's an okay fit. They're a team that can just use anyone at this point, any good prospects. I feel like they would need to get a little bit better at the offensive line for Hall to really succeed. But it would make sense because they haven't had a great rusher since Arian Foster, maybe even Lamar Miller. But, David Johnson and Rex Burkhead just really aren't doing it. I honestly don't even know who else is on their roster. I don't think Phillip Lindsay's on there anymore. He doesn't have elite speed, and he does have a heavy workload from the past couple years in college, over 800 attempts in 3 years. And that's just rushing attempts. That doesn't even include all the, passing plays that he was involved in. But, he's going to be a good running back to whoever he goes to. I could see him having a pretty good first year. There's just concerns about how heavy his workload was over the past few years. I don't have anyone projected to go in the 3rd round, but I do have one that is projected to go in the 4th. And another guy projected to go to the Texans, another Iowa State player, tight end Charlie Kolar. Kolar had consistent production at Iowa State every year, was a pretty decent tight end, one of the more upside tight ends. I could see him being a big red zone threat. He's 6'6". He's got big hands. He's got pretty good reach. They said that he has soft hands. It's rare for him to drop an accurate ball. So you pair him up with a good quarterback. Pair him up with a good quarterback who is accurate with the ball. He's not going to drop very many of those passes. He's extremely physical receiver. He's willing to take hits. He's willing to jump up and go for the jump balls, everything like that. So this is a very, very physical, very demanding tight end. And like most modern tight end prospects anymore, he needs to develop his blocking. He's not great at it. He did decently. Obviously, Breese Hall had excellent production as his teammate, but he could definitely be better there. One of the knocks on him is, he's not a top generational tight end prospect because he's not super dynamic. He can get open and he can, out hustle another guy. He can be stronger than the guy that's defending him. But once he has the ball in his hands, he's not going to be breaking ankles. He's not going to be outrunning people. He's just going to be a fairly consistent and productive tight end. So, again, the fit for the Texans, they can use anyone, so that makes sense. I could see him being drafted a little bit higher, maybe a late 3rd round pick for another team that's looking for a tight end. But, there's a lot of really good tight end prospects in this year's draft. For the 5th round, we have 2 players that are projected to go there. First one is quarterback prospect to go to the Minnesota Vikings, and that is Western Kentucky's Bailey Zappi. Zappi had an excellent 2021 season. He was an FCS transfer, made it to the FBS with Western Kentucky, and that gamble paid off for him immensely. There have been talks about him potentially going in the 3rd round. I don't really see that, but 4th or 5th round sounds like a good range for him. He broke NCAA records for passing with yards and touchdowns in his 1 year at the FBS level, and he had a very good career beforehand at Houston Baptist. The thing is that for him, Western Kentucky is a very well-known pass-friendly offense. They have had some really productive quarterbacks in the past few years, but those guys really haven't turned out at the NFL level. One that I remember, Brandon Doughty, I think was drafted late by the Miami Dolphins a few years ago, never played in the NFL. I'm pretty sure Mike White, who played for the Jets this past season, was also a Western Kentucky graduate. Now, he played okay, but really kind of fell apart towards the end there. Especially with injuries and COVID and everything like that. So the jury's still out for him. Zappi is one of those 1-year wonder kind of guys, and you wonder how much of his production was due to being in a better offense. He also had another FCS transfer at wide receiver who was really, really good that he could rely on a lot. He's got a lot of stuff to develop. So Minnesota, that would make a lot of sense. They've already drafted Kellen Mond last year. Their starter is definitely Kirk Cousins for at least the foreseeable future. So this is a guy that could be a future backup, and if they really develop him well, maybe a fringe starting quarterback. So we'll see how that goes for him. We have another tight end that is projected. This one, not to the Texans, but to the Dallas Cowboys. And that is Jake Ferguson of Wisconsin. This guy earlier in the season had probably a bit more upside, potential to him. Now it's kind of looking like, he's going to be a tight end 2 for most teams if things go well. He's a decent receiver. He's got great size for the position, but he does lack physicality. So that's a big difference between him and Kolar. He's not going to win a lot of one-on-one matchups. He's not going to outrun them. He's not going to, out-hustle them. Not the most athletic guy, but still, decent size and good hands. So there's not as much upside, but he's a fairly safe pick as long as you're not making him your number 1 tight end. Another reason why they're projecting him to go to the Cowboys is because they need cheap players at premium positions, especially after getting rid of Amari Cooper, losing Lyle Collins. They just lost out on bringing Randy Gregory back, and yet they're still kind of in some cap trouble for the foreseeable future. So they're going to have to let a lot of their guys go, and having guys on cheap rookie contracts is going to be a good deal for them, so this makes a lot of sense. Round 6, I'm actually kind of surprised this guy is being projected, given a lot of the stuff that was said about him. But for round 6, projected to the Tennessee Titans, we have Washington State running back Max Borge. He was an excellent receiving back in 2019, over 80 receptions, looked like a really, really good prospect. I think in 2020, he either opted out or was injured. I'm not sure what the case was. I didn't look into it too much. But he didn't play all that much in 2020. 2021 was a decent season. He's an okay rusher. He's not going to blow you away by any means. And his receiving production really fell off, especially for another kind of pass-friendly offense in Washington State, at least historically. But the program did have to go through 2 different head coaches, and it was a lot of turmoil. So it kind of makes sense that he maybe didn't get used as much as he probably should have with all the changes that were going around. I would say that this guy would have fullback potential to be like another Kyle Juszczyk or Patrick Ricard, but he really lacks the size at being 5'9" and only 210 pounds. Both Juszczyk and Ricard are over 6 feet tall. They're very strong players. And the reason I say that is because this guy's kind of stiff when it comes to his abilities. He's fairly strong for his size, but he's not agile. He's not super physical, but he would be an option. I feel like he could be one of those guys that you use like an Andy Janovich in, goal line situations, very specific passing plays, but he just doesn't have the size of a fullback. So I'm not really sure where he fits for most teams. For the Titans, I guess it kind of makes sense. They do need a backup for Derrick Henry, especially after injuries have become a concern for him. Vrabel is a very good coach at getting the most out of guys, so I mean that could kind of make some sense. But we'll see where he ends up. And then I have one 7th round projected pick, and that is wide receiver from Nebraska to the Kansas City Chiefs, Samori Toure. He's another FCS transfer that went to the FBS for his final year, and it kind of paid off. If he ends up getting drafted, it'll be worth it. But he had decent production for a very inconsistent team at Nebraska last year. Yeah, they had some games where they looked very good, and other games where I think he had like a single catch, if any. He's got big playability. He had almost 900 yards and just about like 40 catches. So he's a very he's decent at getting open and making some very agile plays afterwards, very dynamic plays after the catch. A lot of decent foundational skills, but he needs to be more physical in order to produce at the next level. And, going to somewhere like the Chiefs, of course, they could use a number 3 wide receiver. He's not going to come in and replace Tyreek Hill. You really can't get that from anyone in this draft. But, if you could develop him to be a slot receiver or a rotational guy with the number 2 receiver, I feel like that would work. He's got decent speed, decent size, and there's not a ton for him to work on really other than strength and, really just polishing off his skills. So if he were to go to the 7th round for the Chiefs, knowing Andy Reid and their staff, they could get themselves a pretty decent receiver there. So that's all I've got for the projected guys. I do have a few rather surprising undrafted potential guys. Some of them make sense, some of them don't. But we'll go through these guys really quick. First one is Iowa State quarterback Brock Purdy. He was a guy that a lot of potential at the start of the season. A lot of people were really wanting to see how he did, how he progressed, and really he showed a lot of regression this year. So it does make sense that he could fall out of being drafted and be a priority free agent after the draft. Just very disappointing, very poor decision making, and he really, I don't know if it was the way the rest of the team was playing and maybe he didn't have some great wide receivers, but he had a lot of talent around him with with Breese Hall and Charlie Kohler. They also had another tight end in I think Chase Allen that was pretty decent. But he just really couldn't seem to put it all together. And, he went into the year just like Kenny Pickett did, way higher expectations. Obviously, no one was expecting him to become like a Heisman candidate or anything like that. But Purdy, pretty well disappointed this year. So it would make sense if he went undrafted. Another quarterback here is California's Chase Garbers. He's one of those guys that had a fairly average career. Never really wowed anyone with anything that he did. He's well liked by California fans from everything that I've seen. So, there's maybe late round potential just for being a solid quarterback. But there seemed to be a lot of focus on smaller schools and FCS schools quarterbacks rather than going to the same, top 20, 25 schools historically when it comes to the NFL draft. I think teams are becoming a lot smarter and trying to find value in their picks, especially when it comes to the quarterback position. Maybe the guy that didn't play against great competition but has great physical and mental capabilities is better than the guy who did okay against better competition. Who knows? But he's another guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't get drafted. Maybe he has some late round potential. Then we have Dustin Crum, which I received very recently. Another one that's kind of surprising. He had some first round talk about him at the beginning of the year. Kent State had a pretty decent season. Crum wasn't, otherworldly, but he wasn't bad from what I remember. So it is a little bit surprising to see him go potentially undrafted. We'll see how everything falls on draft day for him. But I just remember the hype around him was pretty big for a little bit. But, we'll see. The last one that I have here that I wholeheartedly disagree with being undrafted, I could not find him anywhere on Walter Football's website, so I'm not sure what's going on here. This guy has 4th to 5th round potential from what I could find, but it's BYU's Tyler Algiere. He's another guy that's pretty similar to Breese Hall. Just a very physical runner, had some great stats, and, some upside in the receiving game. Obviously not as good as Breese Hall. I think Hall was the straw that stirred the drink, as it were, for Iowa State's offense. BYU had a little bit of a better offense. Jaron Hall and Baylor Romney were good quarterbacks for them. And Algiere was a great complementary piece. So I think he could be a decent number 2 guy for a lot of teams. Maybe some starter potential. I'm not so sure about that, but definitely a number 2 guy for sure if he gets into the right system. But, wow, I am tired after saying all that. But let me know what you guys think. Did you guys write to any of the prospects this year? Which ones did you get back? Who do you see being the steal of this draft? And again, for those who maybe don't watch my stuff normally, I'm not talking about every prospect, obviously just the guys that signed for me. I'm really excited to see how the draft goes this year and where these guys end up. But thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Helps me out a lot. Best luck with your guys' collecting. Take care.